Well, welcome. It is good to have you here with us today. You picked a great Sunday to come because we're starting a brand new series called Me to We. And it is really all about this idea of community. And I want to talk to you about that because I'll be honest with you. I was going to ask you to raise your hands. I was going to ask you a question to raise your hands and let me know if that describes you or not. But the more I thought about it, it was such a no-duh question that I didn't want to ask you to raise your hands. And so I'll tell you what the question was, though, because I think it helps frame what we're going to talk about today. The question was simply this: how many of you feel like you don't have as many rich, full, meaningful relationships in your life as you would like because you don't have the emotional or the time or the relational capacity? And I think many people, if not everyone, would raise their hand and say, yeah. I mean, it feels like my life is kind of transaction-based, okay? So I show up and you show up. You do this and I do that, and we do this and we work that out. But it doesn't necessarily feel like we have those deep, meaningful relationships. And that's what we're going to talk about through this series. And I'm going to use a different kind of word. I'm going to use the word community. Because when people say relationship, they mean all kinds of things. They might mean somebody that tracks with them online. They might mean somebody that they knew when they were a kid. They might mean their best friend or their spouse. We mean all kinds of things. I want to use the word community, and when I say community, what I'm thinking of is this: you are connected to people in ways that you value them and you know that they value you. That is what real community looks like. And the crazy thing about it is, you actually have this inborn desire, this inborn pull towards community. It was there when you showed up. It's always been there. I kind of liken it to when you're hungry, right? You know, when you're hungry and you kind of like, hey, I could eat. I don't mean hungry like that. I mean when your stomach is kind of like, you know, like you're really hungry, like you're going to eat somebody or something, right? You're just starving hungry, that kind of hungry. And you can do a couple of things when you're in that moment, right? You can find something to eat, and that's what most of us do. Or if you're doing it on purpose because you're like trying to fit into your jeans, you're like, well, we're just going to push that off and pretend like that's not happening, right? We're going to get skinnier by being hungry. But sooner or later, you still have to eat. And community is the same way. You see, in us, we have that kind of grumbling for, I want to connect, I want to know, I want to be known, I want to have real, meaningful relationships in my life. And it's kind of that, and you can do two things. You can find community, or you can ignore it. If you ignore it, what happens 10 times out of 10 is you end up feeling lonely. Like, I have this desire, I have this drive, but I'm not doing anything about it. And ultimately, I just feel lonely. I feel isolated, which is crazy because this generation is, by all measures, by all studies, by all statistics, is one of the most lonely and cut off generations that we've ever seen, which makes no sense because we all know we want it. We all know that we need it. And yet at the same time, we're struggling with it like we never have before. It just feels like it's this missing component of life. And that's a hard thing to get a hold of. But my guess is, if this isn't you, and I hope it's not you, but you probably know somebody that I'm going to describe. They get off work and they get done with whatever they're doing, or they get done with their day and they go home and the garage door goes up and they pull in and the garage door goes down, and then that's it. They're safe and comfortable. They're locked away in their home. They're looking at their screen. And like I said, they're safe and sound, but they're also pretty much cut off from everybody else. They're comfortable, but they have no connections. And they do that in the evenings and on the weekends, and they do it over and over and over. And they just end up lonely. And they're like, well, I have my family. But when you press, when you probe, the relationships with their family are those transactional things. I take the kids and drop them off. She does this, I do that. There's not that deep, meaningful, God-appointed relationship. And when we talk about life, it's that we're talking about. It's not having all the money and all the stuff and everything line up and everything works out and everything is smooth and easy for me. It's nice when that happens, but if that's your only definition of a good life, it's lacking, right? There's more to it than that. There's got to be more to it than that. Right now, 3 out of 5 people would say, 60%, which to me is just crazy, 60% would say that they experience what's now being termed chronic loneliness. That's not every once in a while when I'm at home and I'm by myself and I look around, I'm a little bored and I kind of wish I had somebody to do something with. That's not chronic loneliness. That's just, I feel lonely right now, or I wish I could do something right now. Chronic loneliness is exactly like it sounds. My regular experience is I feel like I am alone. I feel like I am disconnected from other people. That's my regular experience. And what scientists and doctors are telling us is it is worse for your health than either smoking or obesity or not having access to health care. Being chronically lonely is worse for your health than those things even. So, I mean, this is a real huge problem, and we feel it, we know it, we've experienced it. And then you add it to kind of the current climate, right? A lot of people have, maybe not you, because you're probably not involved with the school, but a lot of people are stressed right now, right? Everybody is stressed. And let's just kind of, cards on the table. There's never been a time when people haven't been stressed. As long as there's been people, there's been stress. So there was never this time where everything was great and easy and never had any worries. But when you combine stress with loneliness, you get a really weird and toxic kind of outcome. And it looks like this. It looks like going to the grocery store and seeing some lady just lose it over the cost of a box of cereal, yelling at the clerk and the manager, and then it spills out in the parking lot. And it's just crazy stuff like that that's happening all the time now, that people seem to have forgotten how to act in public. Things we didn't expect, people responding in unexpected ways at things that really don't make that much difference, but for some reason it triggers them. Here's what's going on behind the scenes. One of the things that comes along with stress is frustration and anger. And if it's not dealt with, eventually rage. It happens to all of us, no matter who you are. If you don't deal with your stress, you start out frustrated, then you get angry, and then eventually it shows up as rage. Now, when you combine that with lonely, man, it gets really, really dangerous. Because you've had the experience where you got upset about something. You got kind of keyed up, you were frustrated, and you came home and you told your spouse or your friend or your mom or somebody you talked to them, and you kind of vented and you shared it all, and they talked you through it, and before long you were like, okay, calm down. All right, yeah, okay, maybe it wasn't that big a deal. It really made me mad. Well, what happens when you have no one to talk you down? And that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing people out in the rest of the world, out in the wide world, and nobody is talking them down. And their frustration is reaching a point, and they combine that with loneliness because they have no one in their life, and it just shows up in the weirdest places, in the weirdest ways. And I can't say that's true all the time, but anytime you see somebody losing it out in public, the smart money says it's because they're stressed and they're lonely. That's probably what's going on. And that's kind of a place none of us want to be. We want community, and we certainly don't want to feel lonely. So what we're going to be talking about today and over the rest of this series is a very simple idea, that moving towards community moves you into life. Moving towards community, those real, powerful, meaningful relationships, moves you into life. And like I said, not just life, not just things going well, not just having a few extra bucks. I'm talking about the life God created you to live. The life where you wake up and you are excited about what God is doing in your life and what God is doing around you and how you get to connect with Him and connect with others. That's the life God created you to live. And as you move towards community, you move into that kind of life. Now, one of the ways this happens is actually pretty extraordinary, and I think the best way to explain it is with this piece of paper. Sidney Nagel is a physicist that did a study on, of all things, crumpling up paper, okay? And so what he says is, no matter how much you crumple up a piece of paper, and some of you are probably smarter and stronger than I am, you probably get it a lot smaller than this, but no matter how much you crumple it up, a human being, you can crumple it up as small as you can possibly get it, and it's still 75% air, no matter how much you try to compress it. As a matter of fact, he did an experiment where he took it and he put it under this giant metal piston and he put pressure on it to see how long would it take to completely flatten the piece of paper. And 3 weeks later, it was still showing that the piston was compressing the paper. It just couldn't crush it. And you think, well, wow, that's pretty interesting, but what does that have to do with me? He did some microscopic research to find out, why is this paper so hard to crush? And what he found was when you went down to the microscopic level, they found that there's all these little tiny peaks in the piece of paper. And they are connected to each other. They're networked together, all these little ridges, and it makes the paper almost impossible to crush. Here's where that hits for you and me. You see, the community that you're looking for, God has it for you. And I believe He has it for you right here in His church. And what happens is, when you and I are like those little ridges, when we connect to Jesus and we connect to each other, some incredible things happen. First of all, it becomes impossible to crush us. Second of all, the loneliness, the stress, the rage, it's not that those go away, but suddenly those are much more easily dealt with because we live in this network connection with Jesus and with each other, community that we're looking for, and it puts those things, those kind of symptoms of the problem off to the side. And it brings us into this networked relationship of community that really changes everything. And so that's what we're going to look at today. If you've got a Bible, we're going to be in Acts chapter 2, actually. Or if you want to follow along on the app, it's there for you. But the book of Acts was written by a guy named Luke. Luke was a doctor, and he was educated, and he was a smart guy, and he watched a lot of things happen, and he wrote those down, and he also talked to a lot of eyewitnesses, people that were there that saw things happen. And what he did was he wrote this book of Acts as a letter to one of his friends, because his friend had heard about Jesus, he had heard about the church, he had heard about all this stuff, but he wasn't really sure what it was. And so Luke said, well, let me tell you what I know and what the people who were there are saying about what happened. And so Luke writes this book of Acts as a letter to his friend. And in it, he records, if you want kind of the big, broad summary of the book of Acts, it is what happened after Jesus left, when the Holy Spirit moved in and the church was born and started to kind of live out this calling, this mission that God gave it, what actually happened. And that's what the book of Acts details. It shows us how the church, small, really insignificant compared to everything else, started and became what it is now. And so let's read together in Acts chapter 2, verse 42, not only how the church got started, but something to me that's really critical and really interesting, how they experienced this community that you want, that you've been looking for, that deals with the loneliness that so many people have struggled through. Acts chapter 2, verse 42, it says this: they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together. They had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. And every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Now, especially if you've gone to church, or even if you've just read a lot of stories in your life, you might read that and think, okay, that's kind of the happy ending, right? Everybody loved each other and everything was great and it all went perfect and smooth. If you read the rest of the book of Acts, you know that's not the case. No, they encountered hurdle after hurdle, issue after issue, problem after problem, just like you do, just like we do. But yet they had this connection, this community that they experienced in their connection with Christ and their connection with each other that walked them through all of those things. And that to me is what is so incredibly powerful. That's where the church was born. Now, before I go any further, I do want to say something. I mean, we talk about church, we're at church, everybody has an idea of what church means. If you've been around here, you've heard me say this, I'm going to keep saying it because it is so misunderstood today. So many times when people talk about church, what they think of is the building that you meet in, or they think about the institution of the church, or maybe you grew up Catholic and you think of the Catholic Church, and we have all these different ideas, and unfortunately, a lot of times the word church gets hijacked and it's used to promote a political agenda or to do this or to do that. Here's what church means in the Bible, and here's what we try to live out here at Mountain Ridge. The church is you and me. It is you and me following Jesus together, loving each other, and loving our neighbors. That's the church. That's all it is. That's all it's ever been. And when the Bible talks about the church, that's what they mean. And when we talk about church, at least here, at least at Mountain Ridge, that's what we mean. You and me together, following Jesus, loving each other, and loving our neighbors. That's what the church is. It's not any of those other things. And so he's going to tell us how the early church found this idea of community. And he says, he starts off by saying there's kind of like 4 things that they did. There's 4 actions, there's 4 tasks that they did. And these are important, but let me just tell you, you might hear these and think, well, if I do the same thing, will I get that community? No, you won't. Because they're just tasks, they're just activities, okay? There's more to it than that, and we're going to talk about them more in just a second. But those 4 tasks are actually really, really important. It's just they're not the only thing. He said they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. If you translate that to our day, what that means in essence is they read the Bible, they looked at the Bible, they tried to understand it, and they tried to live it out. What does the Bible say? And I'm going to try to live that way. They taught each other, they helped each other with that. So they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. The other thing it says is they fellowshipped, which, unless you're a big Lord of the Rings fan, you're kind of like, what is fellowship? What is that? What does that mean? What is that about? That's a weird word. It's a church word. I get it. It means this, in essence, very simply. They did life together. When good things happened, they celebrated together. When hard things happened, they sat and they encouraged one another. When God was speaking and moving, they talked about it with each other. They made room in their lives for each other. It wasn't just me doing my thing, living my best life on my agenda. It was a joint life that they lived together. And so that's what fellowship means. And they did that. They made room in their lives for each other. And then it says they ate together. They ate and they really ate two different meals. They ate the Lord's Supper, which we celebrate here. It's a religious memorial, a celebration of who Jesus is. And they did that together. But they also just sat around and ate sandwiches, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, they ate meals together because they knew something that you know too. Things happen when we sit down and eat together that don't happen when we don't sit down and eat together. They knew that. And that was an important part of their connection. And then finally it says they prayed together. They took the things that were going on in their lives to God and they did it together. They listened to God speak to them together. And that were the four things that they did. Incredibly important. Any good church will do those things. And I hope that our church is consistently doing those things. But it was the heart behind them that created the community. Because you could do those things. You could read the Bible, you could hang out with people, you could eat meals with people, and you could pray. And you might still feel like, I'm missing community. I don't have the relationships that you talked about. It was the heart behind it, okay? And there were a couple of things that really shined in this description that I thought not only apply to them, but apply to us. And we're gonna spend some time looking at these over the next couple of weeks, but I wanna kind of give you a preview today. The first thing was there was an interpersonal responsibility. They felt responsible for each other. Like, I'm responsible for you, and you are responsible for me. Like, it's not just that we know each other. It's not just that we go to church at the same church. It's not just that we live in the same community. No. It's more than that. I'm responsible for you. You are responsible for me. And in their day, they did it by providing for needs, and you know what? We do it the same way today. It was about April of 2020. COVID had hit, all kinds of crazy stuff was going on. The government came out and said, hey, we're gonna send these stimulus checks to help people out, and whether you like that or not, that's not what I'm talking about, but the government sent all this money out, and everybody got the money, and as a church, we decided to do something. We decided that, hey, when we look out over the next coming months, and maybe even years, we're anticipating that a lot of people, a lot of families are gonna struggle because of this. Because the businesses are closed, because people can't pay their rent, because all kinds of stuff that happened. If you were around, you remember. And so we said, how can we do something? How can we be responsible for the people in our church and the people in our community? And so we challenged you. We said, hey, if you're getting a stimulus check and you don't need it, would you consider giving some of it, maybe even half of it, to the church so that we could create some resources to be able to help people? And that as people run into difficulty and struggle because of all the crazy things that are going on, we would be able to help them. And you guys, you were so generous. You blew me away. Within a very short time, maybe 3-6 weeks at the very most, you guys gave over $25,000 that allowed us to care for and be responsible for the people in our church and the people in our community. You paid people's mortgages when they couldn't pay them. You helped pay their rent. You paid their utility bills. You bought their medications. You paid for funerals. You paid for plane rides to funerals, all because you were willing to be responsible for each other. It was an incredible thing, and I guarantee you, if you hear that, you might think, wow, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that, or yeah, I remember that. Ask somebody that received that help if they feel like they're part of the family. Ask them if they feel like, yeah, I got some people that I belong to, that they took responsibility for me. And strangely enough, ironically enough, ask the people that gave to that, do you feel like you had a part, that you were responsible for the people that you helped? Absolutely, I do. It wasn't about who gave what, and it wasn't about who got what. It was about a community being responsible for each other. And because you were so generous, we not only were able to do it for our church family, we were able to do it for people in our community. And that's what we mean when we talk about interpersonal responsibility. Why did they have community? Because they saw each other as somebody that they were responsible for and responsible to. We didn't just go to church together. We were responsible for each other. So that's the first one, interpersonal responsibility. The second thing that showed up time and time again was inconvenient hospitality. Inconvenient hospitality. Now, you might look at that and you think, well, I don't know exactly, what do you mean? Hospitality, sometimes we think that just means we got to have people in our house. That's part of it, don't get me wrong. But hospitality ultimately is me saying, I'm going to open my life up to you. I'm going to open it up to you. So you want to come in my home, you need a ride in my car, you want to hang out at the coffee shop. I am opening up my life to you, and I want you to feel comfortable relating, knowing, and connecting to me. That's what hospitality really is. And the reason it's inconvenient, come on, right? When was the last time that the house was clean, the calendar was empty, and the checking account was full, right? I mean, that doesn't happen. It's never convenient. And I would take it a little step further. Can you say that you really love somebody if you're not willing to be inconvenienced for them? I mean, my knee-jerk reaction is no. Like, if I say that I love my daughters, but I'm never willing to be inconvenienced, any of you have kids, you already know where this is going. No, that's not true. You don't love them if you're not willing to be inconvenienced for them. And within this place, in this church, the heart behind the community that they had said, it doesn't matter what's going on my schedule. It doesn't matter if my house is clean. It doesn't matter if I have everything I need and everything is lining up for me today. I'm going to open up my life to you. I want to be connected to you. I want to open things up to you, whether it's convenient or not. So I'm responsible to you, I'm responsible for you, and I'm opening up my life to you. And then the third thing they did was this intentional presence. They were actually present in each other's lives. They were very intentional about this. This intentional presence was a situation where they said, look, we know there are some things that have to be done in person. And you know it too. I mean, there are just times where you need to be in the room. And I'm not against technology. Don't get me wrong, right? I'm in a committee that meets with pastors from all over the state, and we meet every other month. I love the fact that we can meet on Zoom because I hated driving 2 or 3 cities away. It took the whole day to meet for 2 hours and drive back, and it just felt like such a waste of time. Now we can get online, we can knock it out in an hour and a half, we can do what we need to do. It's fantastic. So I'm not anti-tech. Don't hear me to say that. But do hear me to say this. There are times when a screen's not enough. It's just not, right? When you've lost something, you don't want a screen, you want a person. When you lost your job, you don't want somebody on the phone saying, oh, that's too bad. You want somebody to sit in the room with you. When you lost part of your dream and it feels like it's never gonna happen, you don't want a text message. You want somebody to come over and cry with you. When you lost a person, come on. Nobody wants to FaceTime. They want their people around them. It's just not good enough. You need people at certain times in your life. And just the same way, not only when you lose things, but when you get things, right? You don't want to celebrate with the screen. When you finally get the job, it's like you want to call somebody and tell them, hey, I got the job, and then, I guess that's it. Because there's nobody else here. You want people in the room. You want to be around other people. When part of your dream finally comes true, the thing you've been working for and pushing for and trying to get a hold of, and it happens, you want to celebrate with people. When you have a baby or you foster, you adopt, you bring somebody new into your family, what do? You gather everybody together. See, they knew there are times it gets intentional. You got to be present. You got to be in the same room with them. Like I said, it's not to say technology is bad. I love it. It is just to say there are times you got to be in the same room. And especially when it comes to following Jesus. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, this may not make sense to you, so I apologize. But if you are, you know this is true. Because Jesus promised, he said, when 2 or more of you get together that follow me, I'm going to be there with them in a different way than I normally am. There is something different that happens when we're present with each other as followers of Jesus that doesn't happen when we're not. So it really actually matters that we get in the same room with each other sometimes. And so these are the things they did. And this is the heart that was behind it. We know we have to be together. We're going to open up our lives to each other. We're going to be responsible for each other. And as I said, there's so much behind all those things. We're going to spend the next couple of weeks looking at those and trying to really understand how do we move towards community and how do we get this life that God has for us underneath that. But there's a couple of things that you need to know today that you can actually put into practice today. As you think about this idea of community, and I don't know, you may feel like, hey, I have all the relationships that I want, and they're all rich, and they're all healthy, and they're all meaningful, and that's probably one of you, and the other, 150 of us are gonna go like, no, there's probably some room, right? There's probably some room for some help. So let me give you one simple idea that you've got to kind of get a hold of if you're gonna pursue this. And it's very simple. It's going to take time. It's gonna take time. And I know, we're not used to that. Right? Everything can be done on an app. Everything can be sent online. Everything can be done like this. We can pop it in the microwave. We are so used to solving every problem we have quickly. This one won't. It's just not going to. There's a researcher, an Oxford psychologist. His name was Robin Dunbar. And he did a study on this because he was really fascinated by this idea of how long does it take for relationships to form. And so he interviewed people, they did all these observations and studies, and they tracked people over several years and finally kind of came up with all the results of this. And here's what to me was just fascinating. They said that it takes 50 hours of shared experience for somebody to move from an acquaintance, like I know that guy, I think I've seen him before, they work next to the building where I work, or whatever it is, from an acquaintance to somebody that you would call your friend. It takes 50 hours of shared experiences before they go from acquaintance, that guy that I know, to, oh, that guy's my friend. To go from friend to what you would consider a good friend or a close friend, it takes almost double that. It takes 90 hours of shared experiences. Now, obviously, they don't have to be in a row, and it's not like you gotta, spend a whole week locked up with somebody. But the point is, it took 50 hours just to get from an acquaintance. It took 90 hours to get to a good friend. To get to best friend, it took more than double that. It took 200 hours for the average person to see somebody become their best friend of shared experiences. And so as you think about that, as you long for community, one of the things you need to know, one of the things you need to plan on, it's gonna take time. You can't just get matched up on an app and expect it to work great from the moment you go. It just doesn't work that way. It's always going to take time. And for many of you, there's people, whether you're watching online or you're in this room, there's people you need to log time with. Maybe they're with you right now, maybe they're not with you. But as you see this idea of community and you have that person's face in mind that you want to connect with, you're going to have to spend time with them. There's just no other way around it. And that's a good thing because it builds on community and it helps with this second piece, which is so, so critical. It's the idea of trust. For you to experience community, trust has to be built and rebuilt. And you might look at that and you think, well, trust has to be built. I get that part. What do you mean rebuilt? We live in a weird time. We really do. Because we have been kind of set up to not trust each other in the recent past. And I'll give you an example. COVID kind of taught us not to trust you because you're wearing a mask and I don't trust people wearing masks, and because you might get me sick, and so I don't really trust you, and so I don't trust strangers. And then, all the political stuff, and everybody's got opinions. I totally understand that. But one of the things we walked away from is I can't really trust politicians because politicians lie. And then when we looked at the companies and the institutions around us, we're like, I don't know if I can really trust companies because companies are trading ethics for profits, and they'll even trade lives if it means they're making money, and so I can't really trust them. And let's just be 100% honest, cards on the table. I don't even know if I can trust churches because so many times churches moved away from what they were supposed to be, following Jesus, loving each other and loving their neighbors, to something else, whether it was political or national or government or whatever, or the leaders fell off and betrayed their whole congregation. And I don't even know if I can trust churches. For a lot of us, part of the reason we don't experience much community is we just don't have much capacity to trust right now. And I understand that. As a matter of fact, if you told me your story, I would probably agree with you. Yeah, I would really have a hard time trusting if that happened to me too. I can understand. I really do. But I got to tell you two things. One, you're going to probably kind of sort of agree with, and one you're not going to like. You know this. Deep down, you're never going to have community until you trust people. You just can't. You can't have meaningful, full relationships the way God intended if you don't trust another person. So if you've been hurt, I understand. If your trust has been broken, I am sorry. I wish that hadn't happened to you. But you also know, deep down, the only way to get back to having community is to trust again. It just won't work any other way. The thing you're not going to want to hear is this, and I'm telling it to me at the same time. It is so easy when we have been hurt, when our trust has been broken, to look at the person or the group or the organization or the institution or whatever it is and see all the faults and see all the failures and see all the ways they let us down and all the ways they tricked us and all the ways they abused or misused our trust or whatever the situation may be. It's so hard to look in the mirror and see how we've done the same thing to other people. See, when they've done it, they need to be criticized. When we do it, we make excuses, right? Like, they did this, they did that, they didn't show up, they fell through, they fell short, they didn't come, they didn't do what they were supposed to, and so they're terrible, they're this, they're that. But when I fall short and fail and don't follow through and everything else, I always have a reason, right? And I know this is uncomfortable, but that's one of the hurdles we have to get over. We have to quit looking at everybody from the standpoint of a critic and what is there not to trust about them, and instead move towards how can we build trust with them. We break it down into a very simple example. Let's say you and I are in a close relationship. Maybe we've logged that 50, 70, 90 hours, and we're friends, we're good friends. If you want to build and rebuild trust, here's what this looks like. Sooner or later, in that 50 or 70 hours where we've built this relationship, I'm going to fail. I'm going to. Not on purpose, not to hurt you, not because I'm necessarily a horrible person, but just because I'm going to mess up. And you have a decision to make. In that moment, are you going to look away and walk away, or are you going to stay? If you stay, yes, your trust was broken and there's work to do. But you have now put me in a position where I trust you like you wouldn't believe. Because I failed and you didn't look away and you didn't walk away. And I trust you now probably more than I ever trusted you before. We have built and rebuilt some trust. And now let's flip it. You and I are in a good relationship. We've logged that time. We're good friends. And you mess up. And what you do hurts me. It causes me some problems. It makes me feel betrayed. I have a decision to make. I can either look away from you or walk away from you, or I can stay. And when I stay, what happens? Your trust level just goes way up, doesn't it? Now I trust him. See, this is the reality. While it would be nice if everything was perfect and everybody did everything they were supposed to the way they were supposed to, that doesn't happen. It doesn't. But if you have a commitment to community, to real relationships, to finding the relationships that God has for you, you're going to have to build and rebuild trust. And here's really the hard part of this. I wish it wasn't true. But every person you're going to be in relationship with is failed and a sinner. They are. And that's not to make excuses. I'm not talking about somebody that's predatory and somebody that's trying to manipulate you and abuse you. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. I'm talking about regular people and regular relationships. We have to build and rebuild trust. Even if we don't agree on everything, even if we still have a little bit of a sting. But it's when we admit our weaknesses, it's when we confess our sins, it's when we find forgiveness with each other, that's when trust happens. And we start spending time with each other, and we start finding trust, and you will experience community in a way you have never experienced before. So how do you do it? I'm going to give you several things throughout this series, but today, the one thing I want to focus on is the best answer I can give you is to gather with your church. To gather with your church family, Mountain Ridge Church, to gather together. And by that, I mean this. Look, we're not right either. We don't get it all right. We're not perfect. We don't always do things the way we should. We will probably eventually mess up and fail and just like everybody else. But here's what I know. You have a deep hunger, a longing, inborn drive to have community. This place was designed for you to have and find community. See, most people are not looking for, how do I make friends? Most people are looking for, who are my people? Where do I belong? And I would tell you this, Mountain Ridge was set up, designed to follow Jesus, to love him, to love each other, and to love our neighbors. We have a place for you, but you have to step into it. It is a place of belonging, but it's also a place where you have to log some time and you have to build some trust. You gather with your church family. So let me talk to you about what happens when you actually gather very, very quickly. Two things I would share with you that you could do. You can do today, actually, and then you can start doing from today on. When you gather with your church, one of the things I would encourage you to do is slow down Sunday. Slow down Sunday. Whether if you're gathering online, hey, I am glad you're online, and I don't have any problem with that. I think it's great. Invite somebody to come do it with you and slow it down. Watch the service, eat a meal, have a discussion, find ways to slow it down. You're not just checking a box that, yeah, I did that. You're gathering with people. If you're here in person, come a little bit early, stay a little bit late, get a coffee, let your kids play on the playground, hang around the lobby, connect, check in with people, talk to them. Slow down Sunday. You don't have to change your whole world and your whole routine. Add about 10 or 15 minutes, and you will start to see this feeling of belonging and this sense of connection as you log time with people starting to grow. It's very simple. Just slow down Sunday instead of checking it off as something to do. The next step, the next thing you can do, and you can do it today, is get past Sunday. Get past Sunday. Yes, we gather on Sunday, online and in person, and I love it, and I'm glad that we do. But what do you do past Sunday? Where do you connect after that? Go to coffee with someone. Invite them to lunch. Go for a bike ride. The weather's starting to change. Go on a hike. Go to a ball game. Go do something. If the activity doesn't really matter. It's the opportunity that you have to start logging time, to start making that investment, to start building community. And it happens when you spend time with other people. And I know some of you are like, well, that's not my personality. I don't like other people. Yes, you do. You just don't like a lot of other people, right? So find the person that you like. And some of you are like, that's my problem. I like everybody. I want to spend time with everybody. Well, then you need to narrow it down just a little bit because you can't have great relationships with everybody. We've all got challenges we got to work with. But get past Sunday. Find ways to connect with people outside of Sunday morning, and you will see this idea of community, like I said, start to build. It's amazing. It's incredible. That's who we are. We're a lot of ridges connected to Christ and connected to each other. We're impossible to crush. See, Jesus didn't design you to follow him on your own. And I know that is a little bit of a contrarian message in some ways because a lot of people feel like I'm giving up on the church, I'm giving up on this. That's not Jesus' intention. His intention is for you to follow him in community with these relationships. I gotta be honest with you, every time I walk in here, every Sunday, and pull back the curtain a little bit, sometimes I'm having a bad day on Sunday, just like you do, okay? It happens, right? I'm not a robot. I mean, sometimes I come in and things aren't perfect. But here's what happens every Sunday that I come in. When I walk in and I see you and I see the room, I realize something really important and actually very profound. I'm not alone. These are my people. It's not because of who I am. It's because of who Christ is and because of who you are. And my hope is that you would feel that exact same thing when you walk in. I'm not alone. These are my people. Because of who Jesus is. Because of who you are. These are my people. That's who you were designed to be. That's who God designed us as a church to be. Because Christ is for us, we are for each other. And we look at the community around us and we say, Mountain Ridge is for you. And we're for your neighbor. The rest of the world is isolated and lonely and pulling itself apart. And we are gathered and we are finding peace. And we are exploring community together. That's what it looks like. So let me give you a couple other steps. If you say, hey, I can linger a little bit. I can get past Sunday. I can set up a lunch or a coffee or something like that. Fantastic. You need to do that. Let me give you a couple other options. If you say, hey, I'm not quite ready for those things yet. As you heard in the announcements earlier, two amazing ways to start building that community. One, if you're kind of newer to Mountain Ridge, come to our Welcome to the Neighborhood lunch. It's a great way to meet some staff and meet some of the other people here that are new to the church, just to learn some names and begin that process of learning who's here, what does it look like, who do I connect with. It's a fantastic way. We're going to laugh, we're going to eat, we're going to hang out. It's a great way for you to begin that journey towards community. Maybe you've been with us for a while and you feel like, I like that and I like the people here, but I don't really have those relationships. Maybe the community group idea is the perfect one for you. Pastor Corey is going to be at the table right after the service is over. You can go out there and connect with him. He can help you find a group of people that can become your people as you log time with them, as you get to know them, as you begin to develop relationship with them. There's one more thing I want to share with you, and I'll share it very quickly. If you have the app, it's listed there. You can hit the link. We're going to be emailing this out to everybody that we have email accounts for because we really feel like this is something that could be a game changer. It's called Moving Forward 2.0. And Moving Forward 2.0 is an incredible experience that's designed for you and a couple of close people to you to go through together. It might be one person, it might be 2 or 3 or 4. I wouldn't go more than 4 if it was me. But the idea is there's a little 5-week journey that you're going to go on together. And we'll send you the stuff. We'll send you the videos. We'll send you the articles to read. There's questions to think about. There's a couple little simple activities to do. It's going to do 2 things. It's going to help you grow in Christ. And I'll be honest with you, this is a little bit of an intermediate thing. Maybe if you're new to faith, you need to do Moving Forward 1.0 because that's where we talk about learning how to read the Bible, learning how to pray. You say, I kind of got that. I'm doing that. It's not perfect, but I kind of understand that. I'm ready for the next level. 2.0 is for you. It is going to challenge you and stretch you to grow spiritually and grow you up in Christ. But here's the other magic part of it in my mind. You're going to do it with 3 or 4 other people. You get to pick who. You figure out who your group is, who are your people. Invite some people to do this with you. And you go through those experiences during the week, and then once a week you gather with that group. You can do it on phone, you can do it you can do it in person, you can go to a coffee shop, whatever it looks like. But you gather with them and you talk about, this is what God showed me. This is where I was challenged. This is where I was encouraged. This is what I think I'm supposed to do next. And you will find yourself not only growing up in Christ, but you will find yourself building community in ways that maybe you have never experienced before. And we're doing it for you. We want you to engage this. So we're going to send that to you. Maybe that's the step that you need to take, is to jump in to that moving forward experience. There's an intro page. When you click on it, it'll explain everything in there and how it works. And we're going to keep talking about it all throughout this series. But that might be your best next step. Whatever it is, I hope that you'll take it. Let's pray together.